Chapter 15. In this chapter, we'll be covering the central nervous system, the brain, and cranial nerves. Starting off with the central nervous system, this is going to include the brain and the spinal cord. Now, both these structures are going to be protected by bone, which is the skull and the vertebral column, which we've already previously learned. There are also meningeal layers that are going to surround the central nervous system that's going to protect these structures. The outermost layer is called the dura mater, and this is the thickest layer, and it's really strong, mainly just going to be providing physical protection. The arachnoid layer is going to be the middle layer. This is a lot more delicate than the dura mater, and underneath it is something called the subarachnoid space. Now, in the subarachnoid space, there are lots of connective tissue going in different directions that give it almost like a spider web-like appearance, hence their names. In this subarachnoid space, it is also filled with something called cerebrospinal fluid, which is going to protect the central nervous system from shock. Almost acts like a shock absorber, along with providing nutrients to the actual neurons. The pia mater is the innermost layer, and this is a really tiny layer that can't be separated from the nervous tissue. And you can only see the difference if you look at it under a microscope. So taking a look at the picture, we see the dura mater, the thick layer right here on the outside. The arachnoid mater is this thin layer right here. Underneath it, you can see this spider web-like appearance, which is the subarachnoid space. And this is what is filled with cerebrospinal fluid and also with blood vessels. We see lots of veins going through there. One thing I want to highlight is this really small pia mater, which we can see right here. You can see just how thin that is compared to the rest of these layerings here. Zooming in on this arachnoid mater, here's the layer. This is all the subarachnoid space that's going to be filled with cerebrospinal fluid. And we can still see just how small the pia mater is, even compared to the arachnoid mater. So you wouldn't be able to tell the difference without looking under a microscope. Now, don't forget that the meninges also surround the spinal cord. So dura mater is the outermost layer. Arachnoid mater would be the middle layer. Subarachnoid space would be in between the arachnoid and our next layer, which is the innermost layer, the pia mater. The clinical significance of these meningeal layers is that you've probably heard of a condition called meningitis, where these get inflamed. There are specific folds of the dura mater, we have to know, called the falx cerebri, which will actually extend into something called the longitudinal fissure, which we'll learn about later. But this is going to separate the two hemispheres of the cerebrum. The tentorium cerebelli is another extension of the dura mater, and it's going to separate the occipital lobe from the cerebellum on each side. Here's the falx cerebri in the middle. So again, separating the two cerebral hemispheres. And then the tentorium cerebelli, you can see on either side, separating the occipital lobe of the cerebrum from the cerebellum on that same side. Moving on to the spinal cord, we have the dorsal root along with its rootlets. Now, if you remember, dorsal means back. One structure I want to point out is something called the dorsal root ganglion. When you're navigating a spinal cord, this is a really important landmark to be able to find. If you'll recall, a ganglion is a large collection of cell bodies, meaning when you look at the spinal cord, if you see a swelling, almost like a little nodule, you know this is the dorsal root ganglion, and it also tells you dorsal from ventral. And again, ventral is belly side. There's also a ventral root. Our next two structures you'll see at a macroscopic level. The conus medullaris, if you trace the spinal cord to the bottom of it, it'll actually become a tip, and this is called the conus medullaris, where it actually narrows down.